Well, this is the 31st of October 2019, and a continuation of repacking my baffles on my Monster Rounds on my 2011 Ultra Classic. It's a little difficult to get them out. It took a little bit of wiggling and pulling to get this out, and I'll try to point it out to you. Of course, that's the packing material there that was in there. Pretty sad. And this fits in there like so. Vance and Hines was good enough to send me some schematic to show me what I was up against. But I've got to vacuum that out, clean it up, and then I'm going to clean this up real well. I have some black engine paint that I'm going to paint it with. That's good up till like 500 degrees Fahrenheit, which is give it a little more protection. That's my right side, of course. I've started my left side. It's showing some sign to be a little more difficult to get it to pull out that I was able to get on the right side. I'm in hopes that I don't have to pull the muffler off itself. I think I can get it worked out. It just takes a lot of patience and a little effort to do so, but thought I'd show you what it looks like. You have a piece of fiberglass insulation that'll wrap into here, and you wrap it tight so that obviously it'll fit into the diameter of this point here. And then you have a little piece that fits back here in the back, and I may redo this to make it look a little better. But I just wanted to kind of give you an update. It takes a little time to do so, it can come out, but it just it takes time. And I did want to show you the old baffle material. I got this out of my left side muffler, and I was able to salvage the majority of that out of it without getting it all torn up. This obviously came out of my right side, and it got stuck, and so it got torn up coming out, which I'm not disappointed in. And then this is the strips that wrap around the baffle section of the quiet baffle, which is at the very end, and same length. I'm not sure what the exact length of this is here, but what they sent me was the same length. And so this section here for the main baffle is roughly about 21 inches, and you can see where it wrapped around the initial part of the baffle, and then the second part of the wrap here is the second half of the wrap. You notice that they have looks like tape got stuck to it. To use a tape it up and hold it in place, and I've done that before. I'll probably use just masking tape because that works out well. There are 2 bolts right here at the bottom on each muffler that is required to pull out, and then you basically are going to wiggle this baffle and work it out. And it can be easy, and it can be a little bit of rough work too, and patience to get it out. You have to be patient about it and not get overly aggressive, but it will come out. Once I got the baffles out, which I will show you the baffles here in a moment, I took a rough pad and put it on a piece of wood, and I basically scrubbed the inside of the muffler housing out so that I didn't have any kind of residue left there to give me a problem when I'm putting it back in with the new packing material. Then after I did that, I took a paper towel and cleaned it out. I took a cloth and cleaned it out as well. So it's basically cleaned out as we see it now. So I'll show you over here. Go to my workbench and show you what I was doing. In cleaning out the muffler housing itself, I got this scrub pad and basically flat 1x2 and just a couple of tacks on each side and tacked it in. And this is about 3.5 inches wide, so I was able to basically spin it in there and scrub it, you know, in various directions to get it cleaned up. And so it's pretty cleaned up right now. It's nice and smooth and so forth. This is what the baffles look like on the monster rounds. They're roughly about 17 or so inches long, I believe. What the overall dimensions, like 17 inches, 3 inches right here, and about 11 inches here that actual baffling material fits on. This strip here wraps around this completely at this end of it, and of course my end cap attaches to this, and then this is roughly 11 inches wide on the main strip. And I measured the old material coming out, and it's like 20.5 inches, so it's about down to here. So it basically gives you a double wrap once you get it rolled on there. And the key thing is that you get it started and you pack it tight or pull it tight when you roll it on. And I will show that in a subsequent video on wrapping this one up. It is very much like one I did for rush mufflers in an earlier video, but the same idea. Then once that's all done, then of course I'll have my my end caps, because I got 2 new end caps to replace the old ones, which had failed. The chrome had failed on the old ones, and I worked out the process with Vance and Hines, and they supplied me with some 2 new ones and the packing material. So getting this baffle system out is, like I say, if it's been in there for a little bit, it's going to hang up a little bit, and it's going to take a little bit of wiggle back and forth and just pressure on it. You can't hammer it out. It's just got to be slowly pulled, and you can do it, but it just takes time. And if it's really stuck in there, then yeah, that might be an issue where you have to take the muffler itself off and try to tap it from the other end to see if you can get some more pressure on it to pull it out. But anyhow, I've taken these baffles and cleaned them up, and then I resprayed them with engine paint that's good up to 2,000 degrees. So, you know, that's not going to be an issue, but it will keep rust from developing, and I'll get another lifetime out of these, I hope. They're great mufflers. I really like the monster rounds. You can still get a nice sound out of them, but without having it being too loud, and I think they sound pretty nice. I'm showing this here, if you can see it. I've got 2 holes in the quiet baffle plate that is in the midpoint of this baffle, and that's the way they make monster rounds. It has a quiet baffle built into it. I talked to Vance and Hines. They said, no, that's not normally done. And so then I talked to my Harley dealer, who totally rebuilt my engine, and this is up on my YouTube as well. But They told me since it does not have it's a non-cat header, they just to make it easier and a more accurate reading on the exhaust issues when they dyno tune it, they just drill 2 half-inch holes there, and they stick one probe all the way up to the front pipe, and the next probe will go and they work it up to the second pipe, and then they do the dyno tune, and it gets a better accurate reading. And in doing so, they don't have to take the oxygen sensors off the header and plug it in this way. It's less labor intensive, I guess you'd say. I may go ahead and plug these since I've already had it dyno tuned, and I don't see where I'm going to need to re-dyno the bike because it actually runs really good. So we will pause it here, and I will show you my procedure in wrapping. In wrapping the packing material around the main course of the baffle itself, it's roughly 10 inches from this point here to the next plate here, which separates this direction to the quiet baffle that Vance & Hines puts in the monster rounds, and that's what makes it a quieter unit for touring bikes. The material, the fiberglass material packing that they sent to me, is roughly, of course, this width, and it's perfect for that. I cut it at 20 inches, which is what the original piece on one side came out as, and I measured that, and so it's almost like a double wrap, but you're doing it as one turn, one roll over it. In doing that, I just to kind of give you a point of view here, I started out wrapping it around and doing it as tight as I could, and then once I got it tightened or got it down to a point where I felt like it was pretty firm there, then I took some masking tape and just put a strip of masking tape in 3 sections on the packing material itself. And then in my previous videos I've done in repacking mufflers, which I did on a Rush muffler several years ago on my 2011 or 2005 Heritage Softail. I had wrapped the outside of the packing itself down very tightly with masking tape completely from one end to the other. And after the struggle I had getting the original units out of the monster rounds, and it took a bit, got them out, but they don't use a lot of tape in theirs to get them out in case you do have to pull them out. So what I did in this case was to I thought about doing this. I said, what's another way of doing it? So I basically got dressing gauze for wounds, for wound care. This happens to be, I believe it's 3 inches by 72 inches, roughly. And it's quite strong. This is actually a little different than I had some earlier gauze I used on the other side, just a little stronger, I think. But my lovely assistant, my wife, helped me stretch this on there, and I got it stretched around, and as I got it secured on this end and we would turn it, I would just with a very strong pull on it, got it squeezed down and rolled in with this gauze at the full length. And so in my thinking that this gauze will not, since it's basically a nylon, it might have a little nylon in it, I don't know, but cotton, it will not basically adhere itself to the muffler housing itself. So that should go in pretty well. Then in the last step, this strip here, this full length, wraps around the quiet baffle end, and this is the last 3 inches of the baffle itself before this snugs up to the shell itself. And then, of course, it's very important that as you get to this point here, that because you don't have a lot of flexibility in turning this around, you've got to kind of plan it out as you bring it in, that these holes line up with your muffler shell so that you can actually get your screws in there. And I will show you that here as we go around. So I've got this one basically done, and I'm going around here to show you what I've done. And I've, of course, pre-attached my new end caps to it. Makes it a lot nicer when you've got them done beforehand than try to do it after the fact. But I've got this one in, and the 2 screws are here at the bottom that match out for this. In fact, these are the screws, and they have a little yellow glue-like material on it that keeps them from backing out. But the one thing I did find that once I got it lined up, the screws didn't necessarily want to go through, so I ended up taking a 1 1/4 by 20 tap, and I just tapped the hole just briefly so that the screw threads would be easier to get into. I don't know if it's the chrome plating. When they do that, sometimes it might cause a little bit of extra material there, so it didn't want to go in right away. But the other issue is here is in when you're doing this, and I don't know if you can see in there, we can see get enough light in there, but it's real important if you're doing this is to make sure that you clean all this out really well. It's being a 3-inch baffle, I mean, I'm able to get my hand in there like you can see, and you're wiping out any residue in there. If they've been in there for a while, you will have some rust build up, and I basically took some rough coarse sandpaper, and I just worked at it. It took a while. In fact, I've got that right over here. It's just 80 grit sandpaper, and I had to work it quite well in order to make sure it would slide in there. My left side here was quite difficult to do, and that's when I discovered that I really hadn't cleaned the inner shell or inner part of the muffler itself real well, because any kind of roughness or whatever will cause the rewrapped material to kind of bind on that, and it's kind of tough. So taking your time, be patient with it. I know you'll say a few words like I did, but if you take your time with it, it does real well. And you may have to pull it out and push it back in a couple times. I've got this one started to a point, and it gets tight as it gets further on in, because you got more resistance of this material, of the packing material going in. And so as you can see, I can get that into a point, and I'm going in, and since I wrapped it this way, started and wrapped it this way, I'm going in and turning it clockwise, because I wrapped it counterclockwise, and I'm just turning it in and going in at about maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch at a time, and slowly getting it in there. It gets to a point where it's too tight, then I keep turning it and I back it out. And on this side, on my left side, I actually put some WD-40 on the packing to see if that would help a little bit, and it may have. But it does take, once it gets in, it's pretty tight. And I had the same issue when I did my other mufflers on my Heritage. It was quite a process to get those back in, but these will go in, and that'll be said and done. The one thing that on this particular bike, when I had the engine rebuilt under Harley warranty, and I upgraded it to a 103 with a 255 cam in it, I went to a stock header without the catalytic converter in it. And so I had it dyno tuned. And one of the things the shop does when they dyno tune, one is that they'll either take the existing oxygen sensors out of the ports and they'll plug in their sensing devices there and work with it. It's a little more work, but the shop here does this kind of on a regular basis. If you have a monster rounds or a baffled blockage, I guess you'd say, in their mufflers, they will drill a couple of holes. They're basically half-inch holes, and I'll show you that. You can see where I put 2 bolts in there and nuts on the other side, and I torqued them in pretty tight to replug those holes, because when I talked to Vance and Hines, they said that neither side has any special treatment to it. And when I called the Harley shop, they said, oh yeah, that's what they do. They drill a couple holes in there and stick the probes in there. And one goes to the front cylinder pipe, and the second one is fished up to the second cylinder pipe. That's where they get a decent reading on their in their dyno tuning to make sure everything's set right. But I'm saying, okay, they've got that all set. The tubes were in there, the feed lines were in there. It's blocking some of that hole anyway. So when they come out, then you've got more air flowing basically through this baffle direction. But to equalize out the pressure, I decided to go ahead and plug it up because I probably won't dyno tune it again. So anyhow, I'll get this started to a point and I'll pick you back up, show you what the final process is. Okay, I've got it in. New end caps. The others were, the chrome had totally peeled on one side here, obviously, and the other side it was peeling down here, and these are all nicely replaced and completely repacked, fresh in packing, muffler shells cleaned up. Now the final step is to spray a little cleaner on here, a window cleaner basically, and get all the fingerprints off, you know, that you might have put on there, because you don't want those to mess up things. You wipe that down, and then I'm probably doing this one-handed, but that's okay. You know, we all get to do things differently. I'm not a professional video logger. Anyhow, okay guys, we're going to get this thing started up. We're going to see what it sounds like. Let's see what you think. Here we go.